So, hi, and welcome to Poetry Passages. I'm Clifford Rains, and welcome back to our curated series of interviews and verse celebrating the life and poetry of David Budbill, which we present to you in partnership with the literary estate of David Budbill. For those of you who don't know, David Budbill was a poet and playwright from the mountains of Vermont, where he lived for over 40 years. David died in 2016, but his legacy and influence on both budding and established poets lives on. To talk about what David Budbill means to him and to read 3 David Budbill poems is my special guest, Reuben Jackson. Hi, Reuben.
Hi there. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And I think my dogs are yapping, so just bear with us.
They're cheering us on.
They're cheering us on, right? They're saying, yay! So Reuben is a poet, music scholar, and critic, and jazz archivist. Born in Augusta, Georgia, Reuben currently resides in Washington, D.C., where he is the archivist with the University of the District of Columbia's Felix E. Grant Jazz Archives. And from 1989 and 2000 until 2009, Reuben was archivist and curator with the Smithsonian Institution's Duke Ellington collection. From 2012 until 2018, he was also the host of Friday Night Jazz on Vermont Public Radio. Sounds so great. So Reuben's poems have been published in over 40 anthologies. His first book, Fingering in the Keys, won the 1991 Columbia Book Award. His most recent collection is Scattered Clouds, New and Selected Poems, which I just happen to have right here.
Oh.
What it looks like.
I think that's my son on the cover, the young guy.
young guy. I'd also like to mention that Reuben recently published 2 new poems in the online magazine Bourgeon, and they are wonderful, so you should definitely check those out. And I'll put the link to those in the info section below this video later.
Thank you.
So Reuben, congratulations on the new poems, and thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Thank you very much.
And you got a dog. You got a dog peeking at you.
Buddy,
in the back there.
Buddy's
Hey, buddy.
he needs an agent, Yeah. Buddy liked the poems too.
Buddy likes the poems too. Good.
Yeah.
He's coming. He's tuning in to hear you read. So when I asked you, and when we asked you to come on the show and talk about David Budbill, your enthusiasm was palpable. So what is it about David Budbill that gets you so excited, so emotional?
Oh boy. I was thinking about this on the way home from work today, and there's a poem by a guy who was once poet laureate of D.C. named Sterling Brown about the great blues singer Ma Rainey. And I don't want to botch the couplet, but the line I was thinking about was, it's something like, I asked the fella, and the fella say, she just catch hold of us some kind of way. And so for me, that line, and you can just change the gender, he just catch hold of us some kind of way. So for me with David, it was his persona, the depth and breadth of his work, and his, I'd say, honoring humanity. The other thing I thought about was, Jack Kerouac's epitaph reads, he honored life. And I think that's so true of David's work. And as a lot of people in Vermont call me a Vermonter who works in DC, and I take it, to heart. I do think
badge of honor.
His understanding of the complexity of Vermont. I often said to people, when you're flying into Burlington, Vermont looks simple, but it's like a score. It's the nuance, and David had a real bead on, well, again, just humanity, but the specifics of, if you're thinking musically speaking and thinking of David's love for music, the Vermont song, if you will, So all those things are here. And I told his daughter, I said, David to me is soul music, which is a term, you could be talking about either Piaf or David or Keats or Shelley, but his work is soul music. I have chronic metaphoritis, but I think it's apropos where his work is concerned.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about music and poetry a
Hmm.
little bit later, but we'll get to that. But first, a little bit of the history, just kind of backing up. And
Sure.
how did you first meet David Budbill, and
Okay. Yeah.
what kind of connection did you have over the years?
I met him first at a reading. There's well, really, it's an institution here in Bethesda, Maryland, just north of D.C.,
Mm.
called the Writer's Center. I taught there for 11 years, and I think it was 2009, the summer 2009. A former student of mine who has, lives here, has a summer home in Vermont, said, we're bringing this guy down for a reading, David Budbill, and I knew of his work, and he came to Bethesda for this reading, and he's reading these poems, and he's playing like the shakuhachi flute, and he's got like percussion and stuff, and I'm in the front row. I'm one of these people you probably shouldn't sit around during readings if you don't want someone who's going to get kind of pumped up, because I do, and just the beauty, that terse, uh, evocative work of his, it was killing me. I mean, in a good way. And I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of like, and people are like scatter. Talk about
Oh,
social
hands.
distancing, I got it. But I met him. I said hello, kind of like like a 10-year-old kid meeting Paul McCartney after the reading. And
Yeah.
so I'm talking to him and my head is down like this. And I really enjoyed your work. And I know you work with William Parker, who's one of my favorite composers and instrumentalists, the bassist William Parker. And that was really it. So that's 2009. 2011, I started teaching. I taught for 2 years at Burlington High School in Burlington, Vermont. And I also started doing a writing workshop in October 2011 in Morrisville, Vermont. And so you get like the student list, and it's like 8 people. I'm thinking, this person. I'm new to the state. I'm excited about doing workshops again. And then it's in alphabetical order, so you get to B, and I went, maybe there's somebody else in Vermont with this name. And of course, like the 6 or 7 people walk in, and who's there? It's David Budbill, and I'm thinking,
Coming to your workshop.
yeah, what are you doing? Just because I have a Louisville Slugger doesn't make me Willie Mays. Like, why is Willie Mays in my workshop? But he was, and he remembered me from that reading.
Yeah.
But you know how in Vermont, so many people are, it's not a thing. Like, oh, I'm here and I brought my entourage and my resume. He's just like, and sometimes people will say, well, yeah, I'm just like everybody else. And they kind of sort of mean it. But he was just a member of the workshop.
Yeah.
Now, the other class members thought the same thing. They saw him come in, they went like, how can I share a poem with David Budbill in the class? But he was such, it sounds like a cliche, but he was part of the team.
Yeah.
And he made everyone's work better. And, there'd be these subtle suggestions, and you think, wow. But his genuineness and sincerity was there from, session one.
Right.
And I would just drive back to Burlington after the workshop. I'm going down Route 100, and I'm just shaking my head thinking, David Budbill's in my workshop. This can't be, and you're driving and you're going like this. You're driving.
Pinch me.
Yeah. And I was, hit a deer one night because I'm thinking about David. But that's how we met. And I had to adjust to, I don't want to stereotype either place, but the fact that he, was and is a poet of great renown, but he really was and is, it's the poet next door. And once I was more comfortable with that, and once he kind of pulled me aside and said, I respect what you think, but like cut it out in a nice way. And that's why I said whatever the equivalent of yes, sir,
Yes, sir.
and that was it. So, and we kept in
Oh,
touch. The next year, 2012,
yeah.
I got that job doing the jazz show on Vermont Public Radio, and
Hmm.
um, we'd have coffee on occasion. And by the time I was a little bit better, but when someone whose work you admire so much is sitting across from you, whether it's in the classroom or a coffee place, you
Yeah.
still have to kind of go, oh yeah, I do this every day,
Yeah.
but you don't.
Oh, wonderful. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you selected three poems to read today, all from
Yes,
David's 2005 book from Copper Canyon Press, While We've Still Got Feet.
right.
See all my markers here. Um, so what is you have a particular connection to this book in particular,
Well,
or just all your favorites in here, or why did you select these
boy,
books?
the thing with David's work is that, to me, it's like I always tell students in workshops, said this isn't like doing your taxes. Like if you mess up line 14 on your state or federal tax, it could be a problem. But I said there are really no wrong answers in these workshops. And for me, in terms of his body of work, it's a tough selection, but it's a good problem to have. And I love this. For me, was not the literal introduction, but I think, if I may say so, it's like my heart's introduction to his work, or like a deeper dive, as people say these days,
Yeah,
to his work. And I think a lot of things that we as writers strive to do, he does so well here and other places too. But getting so much out of a few words,
yeah,
choosing the right words. And I know once we talked about Miles Davis a lot, and how he's, those recordings with Coltrane, where Coltrane's playing like arpeggios all over the place,
mm,
and Miles is kind of like 4 or 5 words. So he's like the Calvin Coolidge of music, and David's like that. You get, but it's what he says,
right,
and
right,
where you end up at the conclusion of a piece, and you go, how did he do that? It's like,
yeah,
8 words, boom. So that
yeah,
was it. I could have.
yeah,
I decided not to drive myself bonkers trying to figure out, which book or books, because this would be like
this
a
is perfect.
symposium, and we'd be here till October.
I wouldn't mind, but maybe the
Yeah, I
viewers
know,
would.
but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
the poem you selected is called "End of November," and
right,
it's pretty, like you said, it's pretty short and economized, but
right.
really wonderful. Would you like to start off with reading that one?
Sure, sure.
Excellent.
End of November. Deer season over. Deer hunters gone. Fewer and fewer people pass by on the road below the house. Snow begins to fall here on Judevine Mountain. A blanket for my garden. In white, quiet emptiness grows this unseen winter vegetable fertilized by snow. Um,
Mm,
and I was, well, of course, thinking of many things, but how so much occurs in a few lines, and
a few
the
lines.
power and the dignity in what another teacher of mine, Amiri Baraka, called everyday language. And often we take, so deer season over, deer hunters gone,
Mm,
fewer and fewer people pass by on the road below the house. Yes, it's descriptive, but it's the beginning of a pretty substantial journey
mm,
within the context of a very few words, and
right. He-
it's very evocative. The other thing I would say about David's work is, if you're thinking of, say, the whole Judivine as metaphor and its connection to places in the state of Vermont, you can, and this is true for any bit of writing, you can mash down too hard on the accelerator, and
mm,
even if one means well, you can kind of over binge, if I can make up that word, on cliches.
yeah.
But that originality, and along with the terse characteristics, is so consistent in his work.
Mm,
I thought of something. Saxophonist Lester Young told a reporter, he said, "You've got to be original, man." And David was always original. And
he was.
I
Yeah.
think even for people who've never set foot in Vermont, or they never heard of Judivine until they set foot or heart or eyes in this work. It translates, and that's the other thing about his work. It does honor the soul of a place, but it's something that you can feel and reflect upon. You could be in Pittsburgh or Calcutta or anywhere. So
yeah, I love that. In the white quiet emptiness grows.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
And this unseen winter vegetable,
yeah,
fertilized by snow.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Man. Lines like that, when students would have lines like that, I'd walk up behind them and point my finger in their back like a pistol. I'd say, I'm jacking you for that line. And every time I read this, I'm thinking it goes into that long list of things you wish you'd written.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not to discount you as a poet, and because I was reading your poem that was just published in Bergen that I mentioned earlier, the one called "Long Distance Love," and I couldn't help but think as I read it of David Budbill. There's a lot in there that reminds me of David. I mean, you have a reference to snow retreating from the roadside, and you mentioned the push and pull between serenity and the need for modern convenience.
Right.
In this case, a Trader Joe's, and don't we all need a Trader
Right.
Joe's? Right. And you express a longing and a love for the mountains. So I guess it begs the question: when you are writing, or just sitting and quietly looking at a flower or a tree, or listening to an awesome jazz solo, do you ever sense David sitting on your shoulder, tapping out a rhythm, whispering in your ear?
I would say yes, because in so many ways, David, think of yourself as like you're in seventh grade and you're at a mixer and you love the music, but you're kind of, you're clinging to the wall. You're a wallflower.
Yeah.
And someone who cares, like, will take you by the hand, or they'll gently push you onto the floor. And David's work and the extent to which I was able to talk with him helped me a lot in being more okay with that part of me. I was, well, this is kind of a Vermont connection too, but the saxophonist Archie Shep went to Goddard College, which is in Plainfield, where I went to school, and he once said, I passed through the insipid panorama of Americana with an enormous romanticism. It has never left me. Well, c'est moi. And David's work is key in, as I mentioned earlier, getting me onto the floor. And I mean, specifically, again, Vermont, but just to anyone who gets you to your own story is important. And I think that's true for so many people who heard his work, loved and still love his work. But it's like you're multitasking because you're trying to sing your song, so to speak. But it's also the beauty and, again, the layers of his efforts, and like, for me, like, Judivine is one of the great stage works of all time. And there's so much that is so true, again, about the place which inspired it and about humanity. So it's like Shakespeare to me in that sense. It's like the world is the changing same, and he, well, like a great musician, like you use that analogy, like Lester Young or somebody, it's what your boat is in the water, and like, where are you going with it? So and yet he was so like, hey, how you doing? It wasn't like, oh, I'm David Budbill and you're not. So
So does Judevine seem far away now? I mean, you're a big city boy now, living in Washington D.C., but you once lived in Vermont, and
I still live in Vermont.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you miss it? I mean, how much do you miss those Green Mountains?
I was just there 2 weeks ago.
You were.
I have family, not to get, this is your life, but my family of choice is there, and I think it comes to a certain point in life, and I think getting older is another connection, has added to my appreciation of David's work, particularly the latter, the latter poems. But it's like, well, do you want to pretend like you're not in love with someone or something? Why? And sometimes you don't know until a little bit later how deeply something is. Well, I'll quote Lester Young again, like a spark of your heart, and Vermont is. So,
Mm.
do I miss it? Yeah, and I, you know, it's crazy traveling now, but I will go back when I can and see my family, and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Well, part of that connection and that pull of a place is addressed in David's poem, which you selected, called "Judevine Mountain Siren Song,"
oh
upon
gosh, yeah,
returning home from the city.
yes,
What
yes.
is it about that poem? I think you probably just talked about it, but what is it
I think I
that
just
really speaks
probably,
to you? Yeah.
yeah, if I were, being interrogated by the poetry police, I would say, well, I just told you what it's
Just
about.
told you.
It's well, I think it's accepting the beauty and the music of a place, a radically different locale. And in the case of this poem, if it was, yours truly, it'd be DC. But
Mm,
um, it's also, well, they're both home in a way. And how do you turn your back on something which nourishes you so thoroughly?
mm,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's a wonderful poem. Would you like to read it for us?
yes,
Yeah.
sure.
Judevine Mountain Siren Song.
Upon returning home from the city,
Yes.
when she speaks, her voice is like singing. Her song is an intoxication. She beckons to me to come near. She asks me to stay until morning comes. Her bed is large and comfortable. The sheets are sweet smelling and clean. Many fine and colorful quilts wait to cover us both. How can I turn away from her open arms? How can I resist her welcoming bower?
Mm.
You know, uh, how can I turn away from her open arms? I was always hyper emotional, and my late brother was 8 years older, and we'd go to like the Howard Theater here in Washington D.C. I remember going to see the Motown Review with him, and he's 16, I'm 8. And it's like Marvin Gaye and all these people are on stage, and the spotlight's hitting the drums. I'm losing my mind, and my brother called me Rube, calm down. Well, so 2 weeks ago, I'm flying into Burlington, and you start to see it's like Camel's Hump, and you're
Yeah.
coming home, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm at the Howard Theater again. I'm muttering, well, more like stage whispering, like I'm shaking my head, just going like, and I won't say, I'll say, dang, dang, it's so beautiful. That's the G-rated version, folks.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
but it's like, um, I mean, it is beautiful, and that has struck many people.
Mm.
But it's in me. It's in me, like like this work is.
Yeah.
So um, yeah,
Well, I mean, it's obvious from you speaking and from your life that so much of your life is deeply rooted in jazz as well as
yes,
poetry.
yeah,
David Budbill was a lover of jazz, and he set some of his
yes.
poems to the music of jazz composer William Parker. And I've also
Hmm.
heard that former U.S. poet laureate Billy Collins is also a huge jazz fan. So, what
Oh
is
yeah.
it about jazz and poetry that is so complementary, kind of like in a Pinot Noir mushroom kind of way?
Right. Oh, well, that's a good one. That's a good one. I would say it's well, Quincy Jones once defined jazz as soul and science. And I think that's true for
Soul and
poetry.
science. Yeah.
There's like the craft of it, but uh, the musicality.
Mm.
I mean, you can get technically and nerdy about it and talk about like, assonance and consonants and all that, which is part of composition. But I think the thematic development, these are all things one associates, well, you could say with music, period. But for me, and this is what hooked me as a kid with language, was it's the story and the song and the singularity. So if it's like, both my parents were avid readers, and my father had this thick anthology. It's like poetry and prose of England. Now, of course, my father was like Calvin Coolidge. He give you like 6 words every 8 months or something. But he read all these things, and I'm thinking, wow. So I'm a kid, I'm picking up, it's got like Keats and Shelley and all these people. And for me, that's like, you have an anthology and you have a musical anthology. You've got like Miles Davis and Shirley Horn and Billie Holiday. Their voices. It's what the individual voice brings to the continuum and to the collective. So I think those things are commonalities. And like the old movie, The Sound of Music,
Yeah.
when we lived in church as a kid, and I'm listening to these ministers, and yeah, they're developing things based, if it's the book of Isaiah or what have you, but it's how they say what they say. And that goes back to David, how do you say what you say? But the way certain words just sounded. And again, I'm a kid on those Vermont granite hard pews in church, and you're squirming, your butt is squirming, but you're also like, this music, this music. And David was clearly hooked into that. The musicality of speech. And again, like Lester Young said, you've got to be original, that originality.
Yeah.
And back to what I said, it's soul music. It comes from like the world, your head, your heart, and you let it back out.
Yeah.
And people, we're better for it.
Did you ever go with David Budbill to a jazz concert?
No, I've
No,
talked a lot about music with
with
him,
him, yeah,
and
in the
I
coffee
told him,
coffee shop. Huh?
oh my God, yeah, yeah. And I said, I used a lot of, still do, William Parker's song composition titles for prompts for like middle school kids. Like
Yeah.
he has some of the best titles. Bob's Pink Cadillac, James Baldwin to the Rescue. I'm like, man, if I could just, but that commitment to the story and the song, and knowing when, as David once said to me, you have to know when to take the horn out of your mouth, which is like, oh man,
Wow.
that should be a T-shirt. Poets learn how to take, and
Learn when to take the horn out of your mouth. I
it's
love it.
easier said than done sometimes. But I
Right.
think he knew how to do that, and again, like that, his eye on humanity. Uh,
Mhm.
like, since we're talking music, like someone once asked the great singer Sam Cooke, what's the key to effective songwriting? And he said, observation. So if you think about that eagle eye you experience in, Judivine or any of these books of poems, it's observation and that ability to translate what you see into something for everybody. It's like you aren't just baking the cookies for yourself. You're kind of putting them on the table, and everybody else is. I have chronic metaphoritis. I could have warned you before we started
It's
this,
okay.
but
Well,
I'm
it
not
sounds.
crying yet. I'm proud of myself.
Well, I mean, we're not done yet, but yeah, it sounds like you. It sounds like you have some really wonderful moments that you shared with David Budbill, and just you must miss him so much. I mean, Jesus.
It's yes, it's one of the things jazz has taught me about, you know the people we meet on this path, is that we all have a way of, again, a metaphor, like we all have a way of playing the music, whether it's like,
Mhm.
your neighbor who, I don't know, sweeps the floor a certain way. It's
Yeah.
that singularity. And I think as I said before, um, his unpretentious nature, he's a very giving person. And that's that's not a given
Mm.
in this life, and for me, it's never been the case of someone who is, oh, I know David Budbill, who is poet laureate of the state of. It's just um, someone just touches you, or back to Sterling Brown, they catch hold of you some kind of way. Um, yeah, I ever since like the time leading up to this conversation with you, I've cried a lot because I guess you miss people. You're thankful they were here, that he was here, yes, as a great writer, but just as a great giving, to use this term, unpretentious individual. And you're on this path to try to do better, but he wasn't afraid to poke fun at himself. So it wasn't, I'm loftier than thou or any of that. And to look at the contradictions and foibles
The
within the
foibles.
context of his writing, again, is like a light for us.
Yeah.
We see, well, yeah, we're all a bit like this, and yet we're doing it our way. So it comes back to like variations on a theme.
Yeah. It's hard. It's so hard to believe that it's been almost 6 years since he died,
Yeah, I know.
and the world has changed so much since then.
Yes,
With the
yeah,
pandemic and January 6th, the war in Ukraine, and the rising forces of authoritarianism, it's all very frightening.
yeah.
People seem so on edge and so
Hmm.
easy to anger. I mean, it's hard to avoid being sucked in by that
Sure.
black hole of despair. But I find reading poetry to be a salvation. I mean, like a sort of
Oh, sure.
escape route back to meaning, back to beauty, back to the
Right.
sanctuary of the soul. I mean, that's why I started Poetry Passages, and I
Yeah.
started it with the David Budbill poem. It was my way of, during the pandemic, of just finding a way to make some sense out of stuff. Um, for me, David's poems are grounding, joyful, wise, and soulful, and reading them
Hmm.
transports me to Judevine Mountain, to experience the sacred peace, the holy rituals, and the spirituality that David enjoyed there. Do you agree with that? And how do you think David would respond to the world today?
I do agree wholeheartedly, first of all.
Mm.
And the second question is a good one. I've thought about this myself, and I would say I'm still in the jury box, so to speak, with as far as an answer. I would also say, okay, last October 1st, I turned 65, which, as I say to people, well, 65 is not 100, but it's not 20. And I remember the last time I heard David read when, a lot of these poems were, this was at the Hotel Vermont in Burlington, and these pieces which address mortality. I mean, still
Mhm.
with, some wry twists and turns, but people were they were moved and they were very uncomfortable. Now, I mentioned this because, so 2021, that's a year after the pandemic kicks in.
Yeah.
And at least for me, uh, looking at mortality and knowing that, as my father once said, son, this is not batting practice. You come to a realization that this will happen to all of us, and not in some morbid way. So, you think about a line like,
Mhm.
while, dance while we've still got feet. So that joy that you uh, referred to just now
Mhm.
is, well, it's like you hear a piece of music and you hear it one way, and you listen to it, and it can mean something different to you, even if it's instrumental. But it's one of the great things about substantive efforts that, each time you can, something else will tap you on the shoulder and go, yeah, what about this?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
uh, I I'm thankful for this work. I've always been, but probably more now. Uh, and it, like, thinking about the landscape of Vermont, a lot of poems I've been working on have to do with, they're through the eyes of a character who's older, and it's like, how
Mhm.
do you navigate through this country or this county or however you want to put it,
Yeah.
uh, and starting to see people, sort of vanish from the playground. So, how do you do that and still
Hmm.
uh,
Still go on.
sing your song to go
Sing
back
your
to
song. Yeah.
point one. Yeah, and
Yeah.
he did.
Yeah.
David did. So
Well,
it's someone who can inspire you beyond
yeah.
the physical presence. Though I wish selfishly, grief is selfish too, and I wish, I wish like heck he were here,
Yeah.
and I'm not alone
Me
in
too. I do
feeling
that
that
a
way.
lot. I do that a lot. Think about people like David
Yeah.
and other writers who have passed. Thinking about
Yes.
what they would say now. But in preparing for our chat today, I randomly opened while we still got feet, which I sometimes do when I'm thinking, just randomly open to a poem and see what's
Sure.
there. And when I did that today, I was presented with this poem called "A Cave on Judivine Mountain," and I was struck by it because it seemed to feed right into where I wanted to go with this,
Right.
and that the poem told me that it's okay sometimes. It really is okay sometimes to withdraw into yourself, to regroup, to sit for a while in the darkness, and to figure out what next, and to figure out a way how to get back to the light and how to get back to what you should be doing with your life. And so I wanted to ask you if it'd be okay with you if I read this
Oh
poem.
goodness, yeah.
All right. So this is called "A Cave on Judevine Mountain" by David Budbill. There is a cave on Judivine Mountain, a secret place, way back in the woods, high up on the hidden slope, in a place no one ever goes. Only I know where it is. No one else has ever gone there. I go up there a lot and sit around, make a little fire, boil some tea, sometimes cook a little meal. But mostly what I do is sit and wait, poke at the fire, add a twig or two, and wait and stare until suddenly I know what to do. Yeah, so that really was a poem I needed today. Because what's your gut response to that poem?
I was bathing in the quiescence of it.
Mm,
I mean, the sound of it, but also again the way he had such melodic narratives, which I mean, so that's a little technical here, but I just think it is important to hear what any writer is trying to tell us. Like this great Zen master said, attention, pay attention. Attention means attention, and whether it is knowing when it is important to take a few steps back, and yeah, so many things. It's so beautiful
yeah,
and so instructive without being, as I mentioned before, it's not like mashing on the accelerator or hammering
mm,
this point or this the importance, as you stated, to uh, take those moments, but it's like preaching without preaching to people,
mm,
which is you know pretty dang hard to do. It and I think it sometimes with people they'll hear something that is so well, I used the term everyday language earlier, and say, oh, that's easy, but it isn't. It isn't. No more than it's more of. It's also a challenge to do it, to live that you can see it and think that's
yeah,
wonderful, but
yeah.
doing it is, you know,
You mentioned earlier that Judivine is sort of a composite of metaphors for different places, perhaps.
mhm.
But it's also been theorized that it's also a metaphor for himself, that David is
Oh,
Judivine.
sure, yeah,
And with this poem, you see him enacting that metaphor. He is the mountain, and he is going into the mountain. The cave is
right,
him, right? He is the cave, and he's going inside of himself to sit by the fires and wait. to see what he needs to do next.
Oh,
And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I just, like I said, today was one of those days I needed to hear that.
Oh, hmm.
So thank you for letting me read it.
Oh, that's
Um,
wonderful. Yeah,
and now it's your turn. So the last poem that you selected for today is called Tomorrow,
tomorrow.
and
Yes.
is one of my favorites. It's got such a killer last line, and
Oh boy.
it's also the last poem in the book. I just love
Yes.
the way it just so wonderfully ties the arc of the narrative, not only of the book but of David's life,
Right.
into a neat little bow with that last line.
Yes. Yes.
Is that why you selected it?
That's it. It's also I have kind of a like a poetry jukebox in my head. Like if I'm taking a
Uh,
long drive, I'll often just like cut off the radio and recite things. So it's like you're in a diner and you push F3 might be Allen Ginsberg, or A6 might be David Budbill or Gwendolyn Brooks, and I just love doing that. And tomorrow is on my one of my jukebox favorites. So I'm the
well,
first. If I were in a diner, people would say, "Is he gonna play tomorrow again? He's done it 42 times." But um,
well,
and I like you. I love the ending. I love the
I'm
ending.
going to ask you to play it for us one more time.
All right. Tomorrow. Tomorrow we are bones and ash, the roots of weeds poking through our skulls. Today, simple clothes, empty mind, full stomach, alive, aware, right here, right now, drunk on music. Who needs wine? Come on, sweetheart, let's go dancing while we've still got feet. Oh boy. I mean, talk about the joyful noise, you know?
The joyful
Uh,
noise. I
oh
love
my gosh. Yeah, yeah.
it's a wonderful reminder of just to seize life now. I mean, the other
It's
day,
true. Yeah.
and I got to
You
tell
know,
us. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I posted that quote from Ferris Bueller on
Yes, I saw.
well, it's all comes from this. It's like dance while you still got feet. And my mantra for friends is, again, this is like the G-rated version. I just say, have some fun, and then there are a few expletives after that. But
Yeah,
this is, and I say it not with fear or growing, morbidity, but that we do spend a lot of time, and it makes sense, like planning. In 5 years I'll be funny, in 10 years I'll be this or that.
mhm,
But like the Buddha said, the trouble is you think you have time. And
yeah.
I have come, like, I'm so much goofier than I used to be. And I just think, uh, see, work like David's again helps you, help me be more of myself. It's
Mhm,
also the gift of time and the love of communion with others, yourself, other people. It is, and I used to sort of jokingly call myself like Afro Scandinavian because I'm kind of bittersweet, and I guess I still am, but I'm more half full, and it also could be some unintended uh, blessing of sorts from this pandemic, but it's you know what I use the metaphor, the jukebox. It's singers like David who
yeah,
help
yeah,
keep us going, helping us or reminding us to pay attention
yeah,
and
yeah.
and uh, and to be, you know, to have joy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have to say, the other day I was so stressed out about something, and I don't even know what
Yeah.
it was now. But then I saw a Facebook post by a friend of mine who was basically informing us that a very close family member was in the last throes of life, suffering terribly, about to die, and needed
Mm,
some prayers. And at that moment, I looked at that, I thought, what's stressing me out? Now, suddenly it seems so meaningless. This person was about
yeah.
to die, and here I was fretting over some little thing that I don't even remember now.
Yeah.
And so, and here we have David telling us, forget all that. Let's just dance while we still have
That's what we
time,
still got.
while we
Oh
still have
yeah.
our legs. Or
Yes.
or
Yeah.
as he
Yeah.
wrote in what Isa said, since there will always be a suffering world, we
Hmm.
must always have a song. to dance to, right?
Right.
Right. So
Drop the mic, like the kids would say.
drop the
Drop the
mic
mic,
for yes.
David. Drop the mic, baby. Yeah.
So I did want to ask you, just sort of before we sign off, if I know we talked there's a lot of David Budbill poems that you love
Sure.
and that I love, but is there any one in particular for you? Maybe it's What Issa Heard, or maybe it's Tomorrow. But for someone who's looking for a starting point with David Budbill, now maybe may not know his work, is there a particular poem that you would recommend that sort of says it all?
Not a book, but a poem.
Well, it could be a book.
I think
It could be a book. Yeah, why not?
no. Well, we can. I'll stick with the poem. I
No, it
feel
has to say it all. No pressure, but it has
right.
to say it
Yeah.
all. No pressure.
Okay, we gotta go now. Okay.
Signing off.
I think Tomorrow. To be a
Tomorrow
bit
would be the
redundant,
one. Yeah.
because it's a thematic gateway,
Mhm.
and it's what I used to call, when I taught high school, it's like it's the open door. It's also like, come on in, this is what I'm talking about. It's not all I explore throughout my work, but this is sampler is not quite accurate, but it is. It's that entryway, and you go, okay, I think
Yeah.
I'll go from here to, like, for me, the collected poem, the complete Judivine,
Mhm.
that to me is just, I keep it in my bag,
Yeah.
because sometimes the subway here gets weird, and when you have time, and when well, like you were saying about the other poem, when you need it, and I'm thankful it's here, and I call it, this is from my Southern Baptist upbringing. It's like when you have the word, and you can, it's again, a reminder of, the joy that we can pursue, the gifts we have. And what's that old song, The Circle Game? The seasons go round and round. I think about that with David's work too, because you witness these transformations both
Mhm.
within nature and within the speaker, as they say in grad
Yeah.
school. So there's so much, like Quincy, just soul and science, and
Yeah.
I think we're lucky. We're so lucky, yeah.
We're so lucky he walked among us.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there is something I wanted to announce, and I'm not sure you know about it, but there is a special David Budbill live event coming up, and it's called Sutras for a Suffering World: The Poetry of David Budbill Set to Music, and that will take place up in Vermont. Some of it will take place in Burlington. Other events will take place in Montpelier,
Right.
and that's from June 15th to June 18th. And will include musical performances by jazz legend William Parker, who we talked about,
Yes.
as well as Vermont composers Evan Primo and Eric Nielsen.
Yeah.
Are you going to that?
The 18th. Yes. Yeah.
You're going to be there on the 18th?
Oh, I just bought my ticket. Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right.
I'm coming.
So we will
Yeah.
meet, because I'll be there as well.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'll be there. Man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll put the link to that in the info section as well, if anybody else is interested in coming and purchasing a ticket. So what's in store next for Reuben Jackson? Do you have anything new in the works? Any new books coming up, or?
I am shopping a manuscript.
You are. Excellent.
Yeah. I do a lot of, I guess like a lot of people since 2020, online workshop classes, and I have one coming up May 22nd. It's through a bookstore here called Politics and Prose, and I did it earlier for Vermont Humanities Council. It's like a 50-year look back at Marvin Gaye's What's Going On.
Yeah.
And see, another person who said pay attention, and
Right.
and so that's May 22nd, and then this, I'm so looking forward to June 18th, because, well, some things you just have to do,
Yeah.
and I'm taking, kind of the summer off, and then I have some more like Vermont sort of gigs in October, but that's later. Yeah, but people used, like, they tease me and they said, yeah, yeah, like you kind of like you live in DC, you work there, but when you are an orphan,
Mm.
as I am, to be claimed by
Oh,
somebody is huge. And
yeah.
last thing I'll say, a friend told me last year he did like it was like a Zoom writing retreat, and he used one of my poems for a vehicle, and he says, "Well, this is Reuben Jackson, a Washington D.C. poet, blah blah blah." And here's the piece. Are there any questions? And he says, this guy raised his hand. You remember the show Hollywood Squares? Like Zoom looks like the Hollywood Squares. You know, this guy raised his hand in his block and he said, "Is that the Reuben Jackson who was on Friday Night Jazz?" And my friend Kenny says, "Yeah." He says, "That's our Reuben Jackson." And I
Aw.
thought, and my face turned the color of a pomegranate because I'm thinking, when you were that kid, the geeky kid in the back of the classroom, I thought, someone wants me. Anyway, this
Oh.
isn't this isn't Dr. Phil. I won't get into all that, but it's so sweet to be um,
Well,
remembered.
the Zoom tiles. I'm going to make that the Vermont Hall of Fame, and David Budbill's up there, and Reuben Jackson's up there,
Oh God!
and there's a whole bunch of other poets who are up there. Yeah.
I told you I would need this.
Oh,
Oh boy!
Jody Gladden, who I interviewed last time about
Yes,
David Budbill
yes,
as well.
yes.
So, well, Reuben, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. You are
Thank you very
awesome.
much. I really enjoyed this.
Me too. I really did. And thanks to everyone out there for watching, liking, and sharing. Let's get some David
Yes.
Budbill some love, and Reuben Jackson as well. And until next time, we'll see you right here on Poetry Passages. Stay well, stay safe, and thanks again, Reuben.
Okay.
Awesome.
See you next month.
You're awesome, my friend. Thank you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.